Hi, I'm L.A Wilshaw and welcome to Inside F2. I'm very much looking forward to catching up with Van Amersfoort's Formula 2 driver, Jake Hughes, everybody.
Hi, how are you? Yeah, good to be back on. Good to have a chat after everything's fresh from the weekend in Bahrain.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, talking about the weekend in Bahrain, many congratulations on your P9 finishes today and your first points for Van Amersfoort straight out of the starting blocks. So you've had a mixed weekend. You qualified in eighth, which was amazing. An amazing achievement, which meant third on the grid for the sprint race. So tell us sort of how that went first of all.
Qualifying was a tale of two halves in many ways because yes, the end result is still very good for a new team in P8. Being 5/10 off, it looks like on the result sheet that's a good result, and it is and was. But I was a bit frustrated, to be honest, because we had a tale of two halves with our two sets of tires. And the first set of tires that everyone uses in quali, we were fastest, and the car felt amazing. We got the tire completely in the window. The car felt, like I said, amazing, and the lap time showed it as well. So when I was in the pit lane in the gap, I was feeling pretty confident. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the tire back, the second set of tires, into the window, and we actually went half a second slower, even though the car should be half a second quicker this year with the fuel effect, with the new rule of not being allowed to refuel. So I ended up being P8 with my time coming from the first set of tires when the car was 15-20 kilos heavy. So you can sort of see where I'm coming from, that it was like, yeah, a good end result, and I think probably we would have taken that at the start of the weekend. But when you know that there was so much more potential in it, and probably a car that would have been good enough if we could repeat what happened on the first set for the second set on a lighter car, a car that might have been good enough to challenge for pole. But nevertheless, it was a good first qualifying.
Yeah, I see what you're saying now. That on paper it does look fantastic, but you sort of feel like we've missed out just a little bit on that. So yeah. But again on paper, it just looks brilliant. So yesterday, when obviously the grid you started in P8, and on the first lap you sort of lost quite a lot of places, and then hovered around the mid to late teens for most of the race, and then at the end, you're in a points position. So how did you manage that race yesterday?
Well, to be honest, both races were kind of plagued by the same issue. In that, again, I think everybody knows how critical the tyre is in this championship, and it's the penalty for not getting it right or getting the tyre in the window is so big that you can easily start to look like or feel like you're doing everything wrong and you can't understand what's going on. I wouldn't say we were as far as we didn't understand what's going on. I think we do understand what happened. But we are a new team, and these things will happen occasionally where we need to go through the pain a little bit to kind of learn how to bring the car into the window in all the conditions. So our basic issue was that we couldn't get the front tires warm. And just that comment isolated on its own sounds like even in the best tire in the world, you would be slow if you couldn't get the front tire warm or a less sensitive tire warm. But on the Pirelli, it's like game over almost. So yeah, I couldn't. I was just going backwards. We had an awful start as well, which was a bit of a shame. I don't know what I need to chat with the engineers about what happened there, because our start in the sprint race was pretty decent, apart from getting wedged in between some cars and losing some places. The actual start was good on Saturday, but Sunday's start was, I don't know what happened. I think we got a wrong clutch setting or something, and we lost 7 or 8 places on the start. And at that point, the race is already kind of done in terms of challenging for the podium. And yeah, we just didn't have the pace, so say for the reasons I just mentioned. So we were slowly going backwards, and the problem, the second compounding issue with the Pirelli is when you don't get the tire warm, you just slide, and then you go from having a tire that's not warm enough at the beginning of the race to push on it, so you start sliding, and then you end up with a tire that midway through the race is too hot on the surface, and you just compounded. You're done then, basically. You know, the tire is set into its ways, and the only way to fix it is to kind of start again. But you're in a race at this point, so there's only so much you can do. And for my side, I felt a bit lost yesterday. Even we had a 10-second slow pit stop, unfortunately, as well, so that put us even further back. So at this point, I'm P16 with not a lot going on, the overheating tires, and then the last safety car sort of saved us a little bit, where we basically, I was on the radio pleading to be called in for a second pit stop because we were like 4 or 5 seconds a lap off all of a sudden. And just as we came into the pit lane, the safety car was called. So that was like perfect, basically. Caught the back of the train for that last lap shootout, and managed to nick some points out of a race that looked pretty bleak with 10 laps to go. So there's a definite positive in there, but a lot to learn still, and I think we will.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you're right. You know, it was P16, I think, up to, you know, lap 17, pretty much the rest of the way, and then suddenly that safety car came out, went back in, and there you are, P9.
It's crazy championship.
I'm guessing that Van Amersfoort are pretty happy, you know, that they've got points in the very first weekend.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's already kind of that box ticked, so to speak. I mean, like, I think in flashes this weekend we showed some very good underlying performance in the car, that if we can get it right, like I said at the beginning, for all the conditions, that we will be fighting at the front, clearly. So we do have stuff to learn, but I think, yeah, to tick that box, to get the points out of the way, you know, on the board, when we probably didn't deserve it, so to speak, for that race, isolated for our pace. But to be honest, in motorsport, I've had so many times where I did deserve more, and then it got ripped away from me. So I'll take this one, to be honest. And the team, yeah, I think they were quite happy. Yeah, understanding that we have some stuff to improve on, clearly, but I think just to get that on the board was a box tick.
Yeah, brilliant. It was great to watch. Now, we last chatted 15 months ago, and it was a very uncertain time for you. You know, you've been in the Formula 3 championships for a couple of seasons, and you got that unexpected call up to HWA, you know, to the F2 team. And then you're in the testing, you're in Abu Dhabi in the test for the Van Amersfoort team. So how did that sort of transpire? Because I'm guessing that then that is what has got you this seat this season, and suddenly you've got your motor racing career back on track.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, 2021 was a difficult year in many ways, not just for the obvious reasons that everybody suffered with COVID and not being able to see families, and just everyone having their own, you know, issues with how the world was. But for me, with racing, it's kind of what I've only known now for 10 years. You know, I did for so long in my life, until I was 16, racing wasn't even, you know, I'd never even hardly known what it was. And then all of a sudden, from the age of 16, it's become my life. So for 2021 to not really have, well, I didn't have a full-time drive. I was traveling, fortunately, had you know, a good opportunity to be the reserve driver in Formula E for Mercedes. So I was traveling to the races. I'm learning a lot, but you know, it's not the same as driving the car. And when you're at a racetrack and you see the other guys going out and racing, and you know you could do that at that level as well, it's a bit frustrating. So when I got the call to go and do Monza and then Sochi in the HWA for F2, it was only going to be those 2 races originally. And, you know, I just saw it as a chance just to, one, get sharp again, you know, get a bit of race fitness, try and put something on the board, like from a result wise, at the right time of the year, basically in September, when things start to get talked about. But to be honest, even still then, my mind was not that anything would come up in Formula 2 or in single seaters for that matter. It was that, you know, I need to go and show what I can do on short notice in a team that was struggling, to try and prove to people elsewhere in other forms of motorsport that I deserve something. And actually something did come of that. but I won't go into detail of it. But at the same moment, the result in Sochi, qualifying sixth and finishing fourth, that was, I think, the catalyst for me being offered this seat from Van Amersfoort. The first conversation came like 1 or 2 weeks after Sochi. And, you know, these things can change so quickly. So I wasn't holding my breath or anything like that. But, you know, I was well in the mindset that that's what I wanted to do immediately once I spoke to Rob, the boss of Van Amersfoort. And then it became about sort of not waiting, but I did a couple of GT tests and just hoping that this would come off. And then Abu Dhabi came along and the test, and the test was kind of, I think, the last sort of sign off to show that they were happy with me, that I was happy with them. And then, you know, the next day after the test finished, it was, yeah, let's sign the contract. So yeah, I was really happy at that point, but it was a good 2 months since the first phone call before I knew it was definitely going to happen. So a little bit of waiting.
Yeah. The Fritz Van Amersfoort, the team principal, you know, I chatted with him after the Abu Dhabi test, and he was absolutely full of praise for you. You know, he was using words such as mature, experienced, and expertise, and he said, you know, that your accurate input and feedback, it made an impact during testing. You know, how does it feel to sort of hear you know, the great and successful man like Fritz and Rob, you know, that's heavily involved, make these kind of statements about you?
You know, Fritz and Rob, together with Van Amersfoort, they've done so much in the junior Formula, obviously, especially the likes of Max, Charles, Callum. I'm missing names, I know, but Mick's been there in F4. So I could go on, but they've done so much. So to sort of get my you know, their opinion of me to be such a glowing one, let's say, yeah, it's really flattering. And I do want to pay them back for the opportunity they've given me here. I mean, obviously that goes without saying, but I really mean that. And obviously for me as well, I want to go and prove at the highest level underneath F1 that I deserve to be, not just here, but there even, or in world championships around the world. But my job clearly is to, you know, there's a reason why they offered me the seat, to help them in their first year, to sort of set up the team, to steer them basically around all of the sort of moving goalposts of these championships, and what I just described at the beginning with the tyre especially, and trying to steer them into the right window more often than not. And that's my job, and that's what I want to do. And from my side, it's a great opportunity if I do that correctly, to go and showcase what I can do if we get the car in the window, kind of like what we did at the start of qualifying. So yeah, I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah, you know, you just mentioned Max and the other series that they've been successful in. You know, Max learned some of his craft from them. And, you know, can you see yourself lifting trophies with the team this season? Because, you know, because you've just said the car looks great, and just from a few mishaps, you possibly missed out on pole and possibly missed out on a podium yesterday. So can you see those trophies coming already?
Oh, no question, no doubt in my mind. We'll be winning races this year for sure. It's it sounds strange because the tyre is the most deciding factor in this championship in terms of getting you results. But the nice part is that, so for example, in Sochi, when raced with HWA, when we got the tyre banged in the window and we qualified sixth, we were still 7/10 off. Whereas when I got the tyre in the window in the first set in qualifying here, for the first lap, I was half a second quicker than anybody. And the feeling in the car was like one of those, that not maybe half a second quicker, but, you know, like I knew that they would struggle to have beaten that lap at that moment. And that's the encouraging part, is like, it's not that if I know we're going to get the tyre in the window more often than not, it's not that then I have to think about, okay, now we need to start working on setup and mechanical balance and aero balance and trying to find things with the car that were clearly not right with setup. Also, it's like we clearly see that the setup is good. It's just about the deciding factors for the tire. So if we do that, which we will, and I don't think it will take a lot of time at all, but inevitably we will have a little bit of learning to do here and there. But I think we'll get on top of it quite quickly. When we do that, the car has a lot of pace in it, and that's what I felt in qualifying, and that's what I felt in testing in race pace as well. Our race pace in testing was really strong, and the only thing is in probably that we failed to consider a little bit was the tire is, I keep saying it, but the tire is so sensitive, and the conditions on a race weekend are different to a test. And by that I mean the installation laps you do on the grid, the having to do a different an install lap on both compounds, so you have a heat soak with them, so you don't leave the pit lane on cold tires after a pit stop in the race. You have to sit on the grid for 10 minutes, letting the tire cool. Then you have a formation lap and everybody goes slow in sector 3, and then you sit on the grid for 1 minute. And these are the little things that probably we should have considered a little bit more, to realize that, okay, we might drop out the window of the tire with those things, because in testing, when you can go and do what you want, and we tried to follow the sequence as much as we could that we would face on a race weekend, but inevitably it's not the same. Especially the formation lap. When we didn't have that in testing and we could get the tire warm, the car was really quick and the pace was really good. So it's there, and that's the most encouraging thing for me, is that when we get it right, I know we will have a car capable of challenging for wins and podiums. So it's just about getting, learning these lessons as soon as possible, really.
Yeah, I mean, the testing in December was in Abu Dhabi, and the recent test was in Bahrain. And of course, we've just had the Bahrain race weekend. So I think regarding testing, it's a very similar environment, and the heat and the time of the year. Obviously, that's going to change when you come into Europe. And so I'm sort of guessing that you might try and just sort of focus on the sequence of the race when you get to Barcelona testing, for example. Is that right? You're going to sort of try and utilize that Barcelona test, and initiate the race.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for test Barcelona, we have the same compounds we had here, so it's a good opportunity to learn that for sure. I mean, the hard tire is the hardest one to get ready, but to be honest, even on the soft this weekend in the second set in quali, as I said, and even in the race, we struggle with the same problems. Just getting them warm. And like I said before, when in testing, when you can go and do what you want, and when you do your real practice start, in testing, you do a start to get ready to, and then you go straight into the race procedure or the race run. You push straight away, and in the races here, you're sitting on the grid for 1 minute beforehand. You've just done a really slow sector 3, you've got no brake temperature, the tires have cooled down massively on the grid. Then you go into turn 1 and you can't brake where you want to because there's 20 other cars around you, everyone's fighting, everyone's sliding, locking, wheel spinning. You're in dirty air as well, which is a killer. And you just don't, it's not the same conditions basically as what you find in testing. So we will work on that, but I think the clear thing for us to be able to work on is to put a car together that enables our goalposts of for the scenario of a race weekend to be wider, to arrive in the right condition for the tire, especially because we clearly see that the car is quick, but we're a bit too on the limit to be out the window of the tire basically. And the scenarios and procedures on a race weekend mean that we're even more on the limit for that. And like I keep saying, in testing, we can overcome that sort of sensitivity, and then our car setup takes over, kind of. So that's what we need to work on, and I think we have 2-3 data points or reference points from quali in the 2 races, with clear indications about what we need to do. So I'm quite hopeful already for Jeddah, but to be honest, Jeddah is a completely different track on one different compound as well. and so I'm going to say that we will fix it already for Jeddah, but I think we will improve it, and definitely the Barcelona test will be the sort of hopeful turning point for our season.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right about Jeddah. Yeah, again, it's a similar climate, similar environment. It's not that far away from here, from Bahrain, but the track is just so very different. And of course, that race last season was quite crazy. So, the higher up the field that you qualify, I think the better. Try and stay out of trouble for sure.
Yeah, it's a great. I mean, I was actually supposed to do the race last year in Jeddah until a week before, so that would have been nice to have the track time. But I watched the races and all the sessions. It just looked crazy, but the track looks really cool to drive, to be honest. So yeah, it'll be good fun. I'm interested to see if they've changed anything when we get there this week. So I heard probably the runoff areas might change here and there. But I'm interested to see even if they've moved some walls for apexes and things like that. But let's see.
Yeah, let's hope, because I mean, we all love motorsport for I think the danger, but then there's a very much a line that then it becomes maybe a little bit too dangerous. So yeah, let's hope we don't see any repeats of last year. A lot of carnage, in both the F1 and the F2. So there's a new season ahead. There's a format change again, and I think we're all feeling that it's for the better. And there are more race weekends. There are 14 race weekends with less long breaks in between. So how are you now feeling about this season and these format changes?
I think it's for the better, for sure. I think the interesting thing I noticed this weekend in the sprint race was, because the points are less in the sprint race, I had the impression that the racing was harder in the sprint race, because there's a bit less risk for getting it wrong in terms of losing points, because there's used to be 15 points for a win. You would get 10 for third, whereas now you only get 10 for first. So there's a little bit more sort of like just send it and see kind of driving style is what I experienced on that first lap. And to be honest, I was also in that mindset as well. Just that I couldn't use it. We were struggling with the tyre, as I said before, but I noticed that difference. And for the feature race, it becomes more of it's not what I'm about to say, but it becomes more of a Grand Prix in some ways, because it's the race effectively for points now. You can still make something of your season with like a few points in the sprint race here and there, but realistically now, if you want to win the championship, you need to be qualifying in the top 5 and getting a podium in the feature race, because that's where the big points are. Whereas historically, you could kind of make something of it if you qualified 10th, won the sprint race to get 15 points, and then managed to eke your way up in the feature race to like a P7 or P8. You would get another 4 or 6, and all of a sudden you're on 20 points for the weekend. Whereas now you can't do that really. You can only probably get to like 15 maximum. Whereas if you're qualifying on pole and win the feature race, you can make 25 to 30. So you can sort of see that it's more biased now to the feature race. So I think it's for the better. I always feel like I would like more track time, and that's the only thing I liked about the 3 races. I didn't like the grid, how the grids were decided, and having 2 reverse grids effectively. I didn't like that, but I just liked having more time on track with the car. So that's the only downside, but I think overall it's an improvement for sure.
Yeah, I was sort of saying that last year on various interviews and podcasts anyway, that for everybody else 3 races a weekend might have seemed quite huge, but at the end of the day, you guys are racing drivers and put you in a car and you just want to race. Doesn't matter how many 7 days a week. If there's a race, you're there.
Yeah, exactly. Like we had qualifying on Friday at 7 p.m. and then the race was 7 p.m. the next day. So it was just that when I was here with a friend, and we weren't into the track until 4:30, 5 o'clock. I felt like I was just stuck in my room all day. Well, not stuck, but I was just in my room all day doing nothing. So That's the only downside to it, but overall it's better.
Yeah. Now, just tell us a little bit more about the things on the side. Are you still sim driving? Was it Mercedes? Is there an Aston Martin thing going on as well this season?
Yeah, I have. Well, including the F2 sim prep, I drive 4 simulators. I mean, I think already this year I've done 25 days of sim, which for 3 months is a lot. It's like 1 or 2 a week, basically, if not 2. Yeah, about 2 a week probably. So yeah, I'm still reserved. I'm reserve driver for this season with Mercedes again in Formula E. So I'm going to the races there. There was 2 clashes with FE and F2, but thankfully they were very kind enough to allow me to go and do F2 on those weekends. One of them's London, which is a bit annoying. So I missed the London Formula E race. So can you believe that? But yeah, I'm there. I'm driving the simulator every week. As I say, I'm the main. Well, I'm reserved, but I'm also the main sim development driver. So for example, after Jeddah, the race finishes at 6 p.m. I have a flight at 9:30, so a bit tight, and I arrive in Heathrow at 6 a.m. and I'm straight on the sim for 9. So, and Tuesday as well. So I'm a bit tired. I'll be a bit tired, but that's the life of a racing driver, especially at this level. And then also, yeah, I drive the Formula One sim at Mercedes and occasionally at Aston Martin as well.
Could there be any potential real racing with either of those teams then?
In F1, no. I mean, it's not this year anyway. They've already got enough reserve drivers between the 2 of them, Mercedes and Aston Martin. But for FE, potentially.
Do you have your sights kind of set on a bit more of a longer term plan? You know, now that your Formula 2 careers are taking off.
I mean, yes and no. It's like you always kind of have a long-term plan in your mind as a racing driver, but it never plays out. You know, like there's too many other factors in it. Just because that's your plan, there's things that life throws things up at you all the time, let alone motorsport. So inevitably, the fact that I'm doing a full season of Formula 2 is massively going to help me. Especially if we can get to the point of winning races as soon as possible, we will. That will help me, to further my career elsewhere. Once this season comes to a close, I'd never say never on Formula One. I know it's very difficult, and I know I would have to have a very standout result this year in terms of championship ending position, but never say never. Like I said, I think if we get the car right, I don't see why we couldn't do that. But it's all about just helping the team, and therefore helping myself to get the results, and the results should speak loudly enough. Formula 2 is the first place professional and manufacturer teams in all forms of motorsport look to for their young drivers. That's if they can't get one of their factory drivers, or if they need a new guy coming in, or motivation or whatever like that, anything like that, the first place they look is Formula 2. So being here is just going to help me in itself, but obviously getting results will massively help me. So I'm quite confident that I'll be able to get something very mid to long term after this. But if we can make a success of this year, then it could be a very exciting future.
Yeah, totally agree 100%. And it's really amazing to chat with you again and to see you back and in the sport full time, exactly where you belong. So you have such a lot of fans out there, and I know that they're right behind you, as are we, and myself, wishing you and the Van Amersfoort team every success this season. Can't wait to see you lifting those trophies, and see Rob and and people on the podium there with you. And so thank you so much really for joining me again. It's been a pleasure catching up.
No, thank you for having me. Sure we'll catch up again in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And also thank you at home for watching. And if you will follow, like and subscribe to all our social media channels, you'll be able to keep up with all the Formula 2 news this season.